They told you it was chemistry. That mysterious feeling when your heart races and your body tenses is often replayed in your mind by one person's voice, smile, or presence. They told you that being intensely, almost obsessively, attracted to someone is a natural and beautiful sign of connection and desire. However, according to Carl Jung, sexual attraction is not chemistry or magic. It's your shadow. It is a psychological explosion that reveals more about your wounds than your wants. When you're so strongly drawn to someone that you feel powerless, that isn't love, it's projection. Jung believed that everyone has an unconscious opposite within them, the anima in men and the animus in women. These inner figures are emotionally charged forces that represent what we have suppressed, denied, or never developed in ourselves. When you meet someone who mirrors your inner anima or animus, your psyche lights up because it perceives that person as holding everything you lack. Therefore, you don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with a part of yourself you've never met. This is why sexual attraction can feel irrational and stronger than logic, even when the person is unavailable, dangerous, manipulative, or toxic. Your unconscious mistakes them for completion, making you feel addicted and spellbound. This can be weaponized in a world where people learn to mimic your deepest fantasies. Some women instinctively learn to dominate a man by becoming his unconscious desire, not through aggression. If a man has never confronted his inner anima and asked why he craves what he craves, he is not choosing. He is being chosen by his wound. If a woman knows how to play that role, consciously or not, he will surrender and call it love, but it's just projection. She is not the one. She is a mirror. Jung stated that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. However, when sexual attraction is driven by the shadow, the transformation can be obsessive and destructive, reducing a person to nothing more than their desire. The darkest truth is that you are not always drawn to what is good for you, but rather to what completes your internal story, which can sometimes be a tragedy. For example, a man who never felt seen by his mother might be drawn to an emotionally cold woman who withdraws love and only gives it when he chases her. He thinks he is in love, but he is actually trying to rewrite a past he lost in childhood. This is a compulsion stemming from emotional patterns that were never healed. The woman becomes his battlefield, and when she denies him, he desires her more. On the other hand, some women are not seeking love but power. They want to be chased, worshipped, and obsessed over, weaponizing their sexuality not out of evil but out of pain. Their shadow never experienced safe affection, so it now seeks dominance through desire. She feels alive when a man falls at her feet, but she runs when he asks for emotional intimacy because the illusion dies when it becomes real. Sexual attraction is not always about connection. Sometimes, it's a psychological trap where your deepest unmet needs are disguised as romantic longing. Jung did not say this to make us fear desire, but to make us conscious of it. He wanted us to ask, who does my soul reach for when my mind is asleep? Who do I crave, and why? If you never answer these questions, you will keep choosing the same person in 100 different bodies and call it fate when it's just your shadow pulling the strings. Sometimes, the person you desire most is the exact person sent to destroy you, not because they are evil, but because your unconscious wants to recreate your original wound in the hope that you will survive it this time. This is not love, it's karma, which is not punishment but repetition until you learn. The darkness is not in the other person but in you, in what you project, what you chase, and what you run from. Sexual attraction can be holy, but only when you see the demon behind the curtain and ask, is this love, or am I trying to finish an unfinished story? You may think you're in control of your love life, but what if every move you make isn't really made by you? Jung warned that the unconscious mind is always active and can be dangerous because you don't even know when it's choosing for you. For example, a successful man who grew up with a distant, cold mother repeatedly fell for emotionally rejecting women. He knew logically that these women were not right for him, but his unconscious was trying to resolve the pain of feeling invisible as a child. He wasn't chasing women, he was chasing his mother's ghost. This is how sexual attraction becomes a psychological loop. You're not addicted to the person, but to the wound they represent and the hope of finally winning and healing. Jung warned that sexual energy, one of the most powerful forces in the human psyche, becomes magnetic and dangerous when it mixes with your deepest emotional pain. Similarly, women who are repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable men might be experiencing a sign of emotional programming. They may have been taught that love must be owned or that rejection is a challenge. The moment a man shows indifference, their attraction spikes because their unconscious says, "There it is. The familiar pain. Let's try to fix it this time." This isn't love. It's inner chaos looking for a savior. Some women weaponize this truth, using sexuality to control a man more than logic ever could. They learn that withholding emotional availability while offering intense physical seduction creates a strong bond. They mimic the man's fantasy and become a psychological hook. Jung would call this a projection trap where the man loves what she represents, his missing half, but she loves the control. She loves seeing him lose himself because it gives her back power, safety, or even revenge that she lost long ago. This is the darkest corner of sexual attraction, where two people meet with broken mirrors, and intimacy is a performance. The more intense it feels, the more dangerous it becomes. If you don't know your shadow, it will use attraction to drag you into hell. Jung did not say this to scare you away from relationships, but because real love cannot exist without awareness. You have to look at the people you're drawn to and ask uncomfortable questions. What do they remind me of from my past? Do I feel safe with them or just addicted? Am I myself around them or a version they seem to want? Attraction is not always a sign of compatibility. Sometimes, it's a warning that your psyche is trying to finish a story, not start a new one. The answer to why you always fall for the same type or can't stop yourself from being with someone you know is bad for you is not in logic, but in the unconscious. Jung's theory of individuation teaches us that we must integrate all parts of ourselves, the anima, the animus, and the shadow, before we can truly choose. Otherwise, we are just puppets with desire pulling the strings. If you keep chasing emotionally manipulative people, you must stop and ask what part of you is choosing this and why it feels like home. Until you answer that, you will keep waking up in the same emotional nightmare, with a different face beside you. The truth is, we are not attracted to people but to emotions we have never resolved. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. If you are still carrying unhealed wounds, they will speak louder than your words, values, and logic. The darkest truth is that sexual attraction isn't about finding the right person. It's about discovering what your pain desires. You might think you're falling for their qualities, but you could be falling for their pattern, a pattern that mirrors your unfinished story of not being chosen or having to beg for attention. Jung warned that if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. A man who constantly falls for emotionally intense, seductive women might call it chemistry and passion, but it's possession. He's not falling for a woman, he's falling into his shadow. He might be chasing women who reflect his deepest insecurity of not being enough, and their validation makes him feel like a god, but their withdrawal makes him feel like nothing. This is addiction, not love. Similarly, a woman who keeps falling for emotionally cold, dominant men who withhold affection might be drawn to them not because they are exciting but because they remind her of her father, her first heartbreak. Her psyche hopes this man will give her the closure her father never did, but this isn't healing, it's repetition. Jung called this a repetition compulsion, where you recreate the pain again and again until you become conscious of it and the spell breaks. Most people don't realize that sexual attraction can be manipulated by trauma, and the more familiar the wound feels, the more intense the desire becomes. What you call a spark is really a scream from your past. This is why toxic relationships are often the hardest to leave. You are bound by invisible strings of unhealed pain. The solution is not to give up on love or fear attraction, but to stop assuming that attraction means alignment. Instead, become an investigator of your own desires and ask why you feel pulled to a person and what emotions they trigger. If your desire comes from a place of lack, it will always seek to fill a hole that can only be filled by you. Jung believed that the path to true love begins with individuation, the process of integrating your shadow, wounds, and projections. When you love from a place of wholeness, you are choosing, not clinging or seeking salvation. Real love begins when you stop needing someone to fix your past and start being present. This is when sexual attraction transforms from chaos to clarity, because you are no longer chasing people who make you feel like your trauma did, but are drawn to people who reflect your healing. These people may not make your heart race in panic. They might feel calm, grounded, or even a little boring at first because your nervous system is so used to the storm that peace feels unfamiliar. Peace isn't boring. It's foreign until you make it your home. The next time your heart races, ask if it's excitement or fear in disguise. Love doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like stillness, safety, and truth. This is the love Jung wanted us to find, not shaped by fantasy or trauma, but born from the integration of the self. It's the love that frees you, not traps you. So, before you fall in love with someone else, fall in love with the parts of you that are still screaming, listen to them, and heal them. Then, choose love out of wholeness, not desperation. This is how you escape the darkest truth of sexual attraction, by understanding its voice, not by rejecting desire. If this has made you rethink your relationship history, hit the like button. Comment below with your biggest realization, and how you broke the cycle if you've loved someone who represented your past pain. Remember, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you haven't healed. Make that healing your power.